On today's show, different game, same frustrating story as the Houston Rockets fall in overtime to a bad Sacramento Kings team. This Rockets squad's inability to execute in the clutch is becoming a problem. We're going to break it all down for you right here at Locked On Rockets.
This is Mission Control, Houston.
Ignition sequence start. 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
What is up, and welcome to another edition of Locked On Rockets, your daily podcast home for everything Houston Rockets basketball, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Now the #1 sports podcast network. As always, I'm your host, Jackson Gatlin, native Houstonian and credentialed media member. Be sure to follow along wherever you listen to your podcasts or on YouTube. Just search Locked On Rockets. On today's show, talking about yet another absolutely frustrating, falling apart game. Rockets lose in overtime to a bad Sacramento Kings team. 125-124 final score. We'll get into the lack of execution down the stretch, the run that really kind of sealed this game and gave the Kings the momentum they needed to get back into things, forcing overtime, failing to execute down the stretch in OT. We'll hear from Ime Udoka himself and what he thinks went wrong in this loss, and Ime actually shouldering some of the blame for the Rockets not performing up to the standards that we know that they can play to in this game. First, I want to let you know that today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. If you want to be right in the middle of the action this season, visit FanDuel.com and place your NFL live bets all season long. And as always, thanks so much for making Locked On Rockets part of your day every single day, whether it's on your way to work, on your lunch break, in the gym. Thank you so much for being an everydayer. Third overtime game in the last 4 appearances for the Houston Rockets. Not a great trend, unfortunately. This team loves overtime, apparently, almost as much as they love not being able to execute down the stretch of some of these games. And this was just another unfortunate entry for the Houston Rockets this season, where they lose a game that they were winning, that they should have been blowing out their opponent by, the fourth quarter. Rockets had at one point a 14-point lead in the fourth quarter over this Kings team, and then squandered it and just watched it slowly slip away. And we'll talk about the stretch of game where that happened. We'll talk about the issues that led to the Rockets giving up that lead. We'll talk about where the Kings made their mark on this game. But ultimately, this is a major flaw with this Rockets team, and it's becoming a very significant problem at this point. The Rockets' inability to we're not even talking about their inability to close out good teams, right? Because that's where this kind of started, was earlier this season. It was like, oh, okay, they've been super competitive, and they were competitive with the Thunder, and they were competitive a couple times with the Nuggets, and they were competitive with the Pistons, but they couldn't quite get over the hump, and they couldn't beat those. Now they're struggling to close out bad teams. And that is not the mark of a legitimate contender. Like, it's incredibly frustrating to witness in real time the lack of ability to get into reliable sets, the lack of ability to execute offensively down the stretch of some of these games, and frankly, the inability on the defensive side of things to get a stop when you actually need it. Like, that's been one of the most disappointing things about this Rockets season so far, is even though the numbers, even after, actually maybe the numbers didn't update completely, but as of either right before this Kings loss or potentially right after, Rockets were still ranked top 5 in both offensive rating and defensive rating, sitting at 4th in both categories. And when I tell you, the on paper numbers do not match what it feels like watching this team on a night-to-night basis. Like, the numbers would argue that this team is like a juggernaut, right? That they're beating up on everybody, and they've done a good job, or they used to do a good job of beating up on the really bad teams, beating the teams they're supposed to beat, and they were still really competitive against the really good teams, and that was a decent sign. But ever since the calendar hit December, this Rockets team has really struggled, and they're losing their ability to put it together even against bad teams now. And that is not the mark of a legitimate championship caliber squad. They're now 0-3 on the second night of back-to-backs, and they are now, of their 9 losses, 8 of them have come in the clutch, flat out just because of their inability to execute at the end of games when it's close with an opponent. And that is a major concern. And we're past the point of being able to just say, oh, well, they're missing their point guard. They don't have Fred VanVleet. Like, it is a very convenient excuse to fall back on. And it is unfortunately the cause of this whole dilemma. And it's going to be a talking point for the entire Rockets season, because this team is a very different team with Fred VanVleet on the floor. But unfortunately, Steady Freddie ain't walking through that door, right? This Rockets team needs to be able to figure out how to play effective basketball, how to execute at the end of these games. And if that means the ball needs to be in KD's hands, so be it. If it needs to be in Şengün's hands, so be it. If they need to, if they are not confident in Amin Thompson and Reed Shepherd's ability to orchestrate things at the end of games, to take care of the ball, to get them in and out of sets properly, then they desperately need to make a trade and go get somebody that they can actually trust to do that job. Because otherwise, this really frustrating, disappointing trend of the Rockets losing games that they flat out had zero business losing. Rockets had zero business losing against this Kings team. That trend is going to continue. And we're going to continue to see these really frustrating losses with games where they let a bad team hang around. They don't take care of business. And you give a team confidence like that, you get them in, in a late game situation where they're only down by a couple buckets, a score here or there, and anything can happen, right? At that point, it's kind of a coin flip when you don't take care of business. And so this was a Rockets team that could have put the Kings away early in the fourth quarter. They did not. They struggled in that final frame. They allowed it to get to OT, and they still had chances in overtime and couldn't even get it done there. Failing to stick to the defensive game plan of guarding Dennis Schroeder. Russell Westbrook forcing overtime on a three-pointer is kind of like a 1 in a million shot. So I don't bemoan them as much for that play. Russ shot 5 of 12 on the night, which is, he's shooting a career high this year. So I guess you got to kind of honor it. But letting Russ shoot a team out of a game has been a recipe for success for a very long time. So I don't really regret that one. But they shouldn't have been in that position to begin with. And even in OT, the Dennis Schroeder 3, right? Tari Eason out of position, helped when he shouldn't have. Rockets shouldn't have even been in that position, though, because Jabari Smith Jr. had a chance to put them up 3 points. Failed to convert at the free throw line. Could have given them enough of a buffer that the Kings would have had to take a 3, and the Rockets could have been in position to just foul up 3 and play the free throw game to wrap up overtime. Didn't even get a chance to do that. Inability to execute at the end of games, missing free throws, not paying attention to the game plan, lack of discipline on both sides of the floor. This team is a very frustrating team to watch play basketball right now. Coming up, we're going to get into the stretch of the fourth quarter that really sunk the Rockets and allowed the Kings to get back into this one, as well as hearing from Ime Udoka himself and what he thinks went wrong in this game. Plus, we'll get to one positive from this one, which is the return of Tari Eason to action, a much-needed return for Tari Eason, albeit still with a major mistake at the end of this game. We'll get there in just one moment. First, today's episode is brought to you by Robinhood. Nobody knows your money goals better than you. Robinhood puts you in control of your money with tools that work as hard as you do, locking in on every opening, beating your PR, beating it again. Channel that drive into your money. Robinhood puts you in control of your money. Trade stocks and ETFs, options, futures, and crypto all on one platform. You can now build and execute your own trades from a desktop with Robinhood Legends advanced tools, or take advantage of the new Robinhood strategies with a tailored portfolio managed by a team of experts. You expect more from yourself, expect more from your money. Get started today at robinhood.com/yourmoney. Again, that's robinhood.com/yourmoney. Your money, your move. And continuing on here at Locked On Rockets, your daily podcast home for everything Houston Rockets basketball, where the best way you can help us grow our show, even after a frustrating loss, is to listen every single day on a podcast platform of your choosing, and then like, comment, subscribe on YouTube. I want your thoughts, though, in the YouTube comments. What's the number one reason the Rockets actually lost this game? Because we're going to talk about a couple of the biggest reasons for the Rockets' loss in this one here in just a second. But first, we're going to hear Ime Udoka's post-game thoughts about this one, where he was not shy about the fact that he felt the Rockets didn't deserve to win this game. Let's hear from Udoka.
Can you talk through a little bit about what allowed that open look on the final shot for Schroeder?
Yeah, we put a small lineup in the guard one-on-one, knowing DeRozan's going to get isolation and two-point game. We want to stay locked in on guys, and he drove baseline under the basket, and I think it was Tari left Schroeder in the corner. We're supposed to stay locked up one-on-one.
And what kind of just went wrong in that fourth quarter to allow them to come back and ultimately send it?
It wasn't just the fourth quarter; it was the entire game. Our approach wasn't right. We had a game yesterday that we were much more felt like motivated for or whatever, and just to let them hang around the way that they did was a lot due to us. Got 19 offensive rebounds, multiple unforced turnovers and missed assignments, and so that's what happens in the game. We didn't really deserve to win that. They being down 8-10, whatever, when it should be a 15 to 20 point game, it's on us. I got to do a better job of getting them motivated in games against lesser opponents.
I was going to, just as much as you're willing to share, what was your message to the team in the locker room after the game? They seemed obviously disappointed and frustrated as well.
Yeah, that we didn't deserve to win. Well, you play around with the game and play around with the team, and usually it comes back to bite you. And, like I said, even the late turnovers and the open shots that they got were just mistakes coverage-wise. And so, that was a message. We didn't deserve to win, and play around with the game. It comes back and gets you.
Well, what did you see, as far as, what Schroeder and DeMar was doing, in that those last periods going into overtime, because they were the one that they were working the ball to?
Yeah, they're being aggressive. They're trying to get to DeMar to his spots in the post-up, and Schroeder was just, a lot of times we were out of position, got rejected on pick and rolls, and our help wasn't there, just over and over and over. And, like I said, more mistakes schematically than anything.
Third overtime loss this week. Just where do you feel the team is struggling to kind of convert and close out games?
Way before overtime. It's whatever allows us to even get to overtime. There's been a few fouls in late games in New Orleans and Denver game, and then tonight, like I said, just messing around with the game. The first three quarters to even have it in that position.
So that was Ime Udoka waxing poetic about this Rockets overtime loss, their third overtime loss in their last four games. And look, here's the thing. Where it felt like this game truly got lost, to Ime's point, right, was well before overtime. And it was actually again, the Rockets had a 14-point lead near the top of the fourth quarter. They proceeded in about 2 minutes of game time, turned the ball over, not once, not twice, not thrice, not four times, 5 turnovers in about 2 minutes of game time at the top of the fourth quarter. And that during that stretch of 5 turnovers, the Rockets were just unable to get any kind of action going, putting any kind of points on the board. And in that stretch, it allowed the Kings to reel off, or kind of in that stretch, and also immediately thereafter that stretch, because the Rockets were eventually able to get a couple buckets to go. They got a Reed Shepherd 3 in there. They got a Jabari Smith Jr. 3 in there, but they wasted so many possessions at the top of the fourth quarter when they could have built out that lead, when they could have gone from what was a 9-point lead, a 12-point lead, a 14-point lead at one point, ballooning that out into what should have been a 20-plus point lead at the top of the fourth quarter, right? Giving them a little bit of cushion. Those 5 turnovers let the Kings get back into this game, and they went on a 12-0 run. Score was 100-86. Rockets were up 14 with just under 10 minutes left to play in the game. And they should have been able to just, even if you go basket for basket at that point and keep them at arm's distance, like would have been fine. But the turnovers, Kings capitalized on them. Keegan Murray caught fire. And before you knew it, you blink and suddenly it's a 7-point game. Rockets call timeout. They get their starters back on the floor, and it still doesn't matter. Keegan Murray gets another bucket. Dennis Schroeder hits a big 3, and suddenly it's a 2-point game in a very short amount of actual game time, from just under 10 minutes where it was a 14-point game, and to the 8:13 mark in the fourth quarter where it was a 2-point game, 100-98, forcing another Rockets timeout. Just that stretch was kind of the game, unfortunately, because that stretch gave the Kings all the confidence and the momentum that they needed to then get this thing at least to stay like punch for punch with the Rockets as they were wrapping this thing up. And unfortunately, the Rockets throughout the rest of the game could not buy a stop. Defensively, they could not get anything going there. And then offensively, they still failed to convert on a number of different possessions. The ball pressure from the Kings really bothering the Rockets, keeping them from getting into some of their sets, some really like a lot of late clock possessions where the Rockets were slow to initiate, slow to get into whatever actions they wanted to get into. And they just flat out struggled in that fourth quarter. They finished with 6 turnovers in the fourth. They had more turnovers than assists, 6 turnovers to just 5 assists. And they had almost as many turnovers as they did made field goals in the fourth quarter, just 7 of 18 shooting in that final frame. 2 for 4 for KD, just 1 for 4 for Jabari Smith Jr., really struggling in that fourth. Alp was 2 of 3. Amin Thompson, 1 of 3. Reed Shepard, 1 of 3. Okogie, 0 of 1. Just a rough quarter for the floor to kind of fall out from underneath you offensively. And by the end of it, even at the end of that frame, here's the thing, is the Rockets still had a 5-point lead with a minute to go. They had multiple straight possessions offensively, even though they could not buy a bucket. There was a lid on the basket. Rockets had multiple possessions in a row with offensive rebound after offensive rebound after offensive rebound in order to retain possession of the ball. They wound up eating a little more than a minute of clock of actual game time from about the 2-minute mark down to when they finally turned the ball over at 47 seconds left in the game. It was a Kevin Durant turnover, and it was a brutal turnover because the Rockets were playing keep away. They were bleeding out the clock. They thought they'd kind of, survived the little rally from the Kings, and you wind up turning the ball over. DeMar DeRozan gets a breakaway dunk, and suddenly it's a 1-possession game, 112, 109. And then the Rockets come down, and again, inability to execute the possession that they wind up getting, their final, like, real full offensive possession, turned into I don't even know what to call that attempt from Alperen Sengun from 3. It was dastardly, ugly, awful basketball. It was a complete, like, the play was completely blown up, and it was a mess. And the Rockets settled for an Alperen Sengun, like, last second heave, because he had no choice. He had to get the ball off, and he barely grazed iron, and ultimately it didn't matter. Kings get the rebound. They come down on the other end, and Russell Westbrook, because of course, Russell Westbrook splashes a 3-pointer to force the overtime period. And didn't even mention, when I was running through the areas where the Rockets actually did have chances in this game, they still had a chance at the very end of overtime. Down 1, 2.2 seconds on the clock. Kevin Durant got a decent look at it. Couldn't hit it. Rough night for Kevin Durant. based on his usual efficiency standards. Just 8 of 21 shooting for KD, had the couple turnovers, had the really back-breaking turnover there at the very end. He was flirting with a triple-double, 24 points, 10 rebounds, 8 assists. Strong night for Alperen Sengun, 28 points, 12 of 17 shooting. And this was a game where it honestly maybe felt like that final shot maybe could have gone to LP based on how dominant he had been. Ryan Hollins was calling for it on the broadcast. Go to the quick seal, the direct pass to Sengun under the basket. We saw it work wonders against the Orlando Magic in that game where he made the little baby hook shot to force overtime. So I was hoping for something like that. It seemed like maybe that might have been the first play that initially got drawn up. And there was a little bit of frustration after that final play. And the shot didn't go down for KD. So maybe something was run wrong. Maybe something happened that shouldn't have happened on that final possession. But Rockets played with their food. They shouldn't have been in that position to begin with. And you go back and look at the numbers of this, and they don't jump off the page here. The turnovers, Rockets had 15 of them in this game. The Kings only had 18 points off of those 15 turnovers. So it's not like they were taking a ton of advantage off of those opportunities, but the Rockets had 10 of those turnovers in the second half. They did a really good job in the first half of this game, not turning the ball over, taking care of things. But as soon as the Kings upped their defensive intensity and pressure, Rockets just wilted. And then here's the other one, and this is the one where it's only happened a handful of times this season. The Kings actually beat the Rockets on the glass, 55-47. They had 19 offensive rebounds in this game. And that just flat out cannot happen. Kevin Durant had 10 boards. Kevin Durant was doing his job on the glass. Ime Thompson, 9 rebounds, doing his job on the glass. Jabari Smith Jr., only 5 rebounds. Soft. Needs to be bigger on the boards. Alperen Sengun, only 6 rebounds. Soft. Needs to be bigger on the boards. Clint Capela, 6 rebounds in 12 minutes. Not a ton of run, but even Clint, needs to be a little bit, but maybe the expectation's unfair for Clint because we're so used to Steven Adams. But this is where you miss Steven Adams, right? The Rockets haven't had Steven Adams in these 3 losses on the second nights of back-to-backs, and you feel the lack of his presence out there on the floor, unfortunately, for this team. And Steven Adams should not be the complete make or break factor for this Rockets team, but it's seeming that way, where when Steve-O doesn't play, this Rockets team really struggles in the non-Steven Adams minutes, apparently. So turnovers, rebounding, poor execution on both ends, not a good recipe for success. Coming up, I want to talk about one point that Ime Udoka made in his post-game presser, as well as we'll get to a little bit of positivity, the silver lining from this game, the return of Tari Eason, and a couple other thoughts. We'll get there in just one moment. First, today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. NFL Sundays move fast, one big play, and suddenly everything feels different. That's what makes live betting with FanDuel so exciting. You're not just watching the game, you're reacting to it in real time. With FanDuel, you can place bets as the action unfolds, every drive, every momentum swing, every single highlight moment. Live betting is best when the game starts to shift, a receiver gets hot, a defense tightens up, or the momentum flips after a turnover. FanDuel lets you jump into the moment with live spreads and money lines that adjust instantly, player props that update as guys are heating up. You can bet on next touchdown scorers, drive results, totals, and so much more. It keeps you locked into every snap, every drive, every single possibility. So if you want to be right in the middle of the action this season, visit FanDuel.com and place your NFL live bets all season long. FanDuel, the game moves fast, and so can you. And final segment here at Locked On Rockets, your daily podcast home for everything Houston Rockets basketball. All right, one thing that Ime Udoka said, and I don't know, well, I take exception to it, is the issue where he said, when asked about, whether there was like a common theme or what he was seeing happen, with the inability to execute in these overtime periods, what's been the problem. And he highlights, and he's like, well, it happened way before overtime, right? It's the, game shouldn't have gone to overtime. And that's a all, fair enough excuse, take care of business before you get there. Problem is, and here's the reality of the situation, Rockets are going to have to be able to execute in crunch time. You can't just blow out every opponent. Like, that's the reality of the situation. And that's why other fan bases and even Rockets fans have had, this team is very rapidly approaching like fraud watch territory, because the reality is against good teams, you're not going to be able to blow out every single good team. Hell, you're not even able to blow out the bad teams right now. Like the reality is you need to be able to execute in crunch time. And regrettably, this Rockets team is a mess executing in crunch time. They are incredibly over-reliant on the sheer, like just the flat out talent discrepancy on a night-to-night basis where they have two star players in Kevin Durant and Alperen Sengun to dump the ball to and basically say, go 1-4 flat ISO, and that's kind of it. Like, and unfortunately, there have been a lot of games where it's okay, well, put the ball in KD's hands, and then they blitz and send two to the ball, and then KD has to, loft the pass over the top, and then you're usually that recipient is Alperen Sengun, and then defense has to rotate over and figure out how to stop LP, and then it's up to one of the role players to hit a shot. I don't know. There's very little. It feels like very little deliberate play calling happening at the end of these games for the Rockets. And it's just kind of like put the ball in either KD or Şengün's hands and like try to let them go to work. And frankly, that works some of the time because they're incredibly talented players. But it doesn't really feel like the Rockets have go-to sets or actions or things that they realistically run to get them a reliable, clean look when they need it at the end of games. And that's tough, right? Just like, kind of, and maybe that's just the reality of the situation. And maybe I'm like way overblowing these things, but it doesn't feel great. Like in a close game, whenever this Rockets team is in a close game, I don't have a ton of confidence in their ability to make sure that they are continually executing at the end of some of these incredibly close games. And unfortunately, that feeling stems from the fact that there isn't a singular player on the roster where you feel safe with the ball in that player's hands. Kevin Durant has been incredibly turnover prone. As great as he is, as an incredible, shot maker that he is, and, super clutch and unguardable with the 7'1" frame and ability to elevate over the top of a defense, getting in and out of the set is concerning, right? Watching him make some of those passes over the top of a defense where he only finished with 2 turnovers in this game, but there were a couple moments where it was like a slight tipped pass here or a deflection here that the Rockets still like maintain control of. But like these are not super duper clean passes, unfortunately, from KD. Alperen Sengun, same deal. Sengun had 4 turnovers in this one, and Sengun is a little turnover prone. And granted, they both handle the basketball so much. They have such an immense responsibility as the 2 star players for the team. You expect some turnovers from them, but it doesn't feel great in crunch time when those are your 2 options and you don't have, I guess, again, just a reliable, safe, steady hand where hey, great. Like, we know we're going to get a good shot on this possession because so-and-so is going to get us in and out of a good set. Weirdly enough, like I remember feeling the same way, like with throughout a lot of the James Harden era, being completely honest, like as talented and as incredibly like gifted at the game of basketball James Harden was, I remember there were significant chunks of the James Harden era where at the end of games, if a game was close, I was stressed. Like there was never that calming influence of, oh, James has the ball, they're going to get something good. Right. And it wasn't really until like Chris Paul came to Houston where it's like, oh, get the ball in CP3's hands because CP3 is going to make the right play 9.9 out of 10 times, right? And you'll get a decent shot, whatever. He'll make the right read, that kind of thing. And the Rockets sorely missed that from Fred VanVleet, right? And unfortunately, the reality is they're gonna live through a lot of these bumps and bruises and mistakes as they get Reed Shepherd and Ime Thompson up to speed. And Ime Thompson had himself a solid game, 18 points, 9 rebounds, 8 assists, 3 steals, only a couple turnovers. It was a strong night for a lot of individual Rockets. Şengün had a good game, and he was good. If Ime Thompson and Alperen Sengun both took turns just absolutely bodying Maxime Reynaud for the Kings. Poor rookie, just getting cooked, although he got the last laugh because the Kings got the win. There were some individually great performances in this game, but you also had moments of frustration and struggle And weirdly enough, I mean, here's two stat lines that stand out. In a 1-point loss, Reed Sheppard was a plus 17 in this 1-point loss. The Rockets have been just flat out winning the Reed Sheppard minutes. They have. Like, as much as we want to point to, oh, well, the defense or the struggling, Dennis Schroeder attacking him, and there was like multiple possessions late in a row, right, where Reed Sheppard just kept picking up foul after foul after foul because the Kings offense was just straight up targeting him every single possession down. And even though it feels bad, like in the moment, you look up and you're like, oh, they're still winning his minutes flat out. Like by a comfortable margin, they're winning his minutes. Meanwhile, Jabari Smith Jr., minus 20 in a 1-point loss. That's kind of ridiculous. Don't even know where the other, because every other starter was either a net. Well, I guess Josh Okogie was a minus 3, but KD plus 2, Şengün plus 3, Okogie minus 3, Ime Thompson was a net 0. It was just a weird game, man. Look, and I will say, I want to leave on a little bit of positivity. I was hoping in my head as I'm like watching these games and taking my notes and prepping for doing the show. You always kind of have a feel for what the headline's going to be, what the storyline's going to be from a given game. Pardon me. Getting over a little something. My goodness. And coming into this before the Rockets meltdown in the fourth quarter, in my head, I was thinking this is going to be, I can't wait to make the thumbnail graphic and it's going to say, welcome back, Tari. And it's going to be so cool because Tari Eason was absolutely fantastic in his minutes up until that final possession of the game. And that blown defensive assignment, giving up the wide open 3 to Dennis Schroeder. He was awesome every other second that he was on the floor in this game. But unfortunately, that's the one that cost the Rockets the game. So look, it was great having Tari back. As frustrating as this game was, as frustrating as this loss was, it was great seeing him back out there. And man, did he provide such a huge impact he matched points per minute, 16 points, 16 minutes played. He came in immediately. You immediately felt his impact the moment he checked into the game. 6 of 8 shooting. He was perfect from downtown, continues the blistering 3-point shooting, had a few rebounds, couple of them on the offensive glass, had a few assists, had a steal mixed in there, didn't turn the ball over. Just outside of that one blown assignment at the end of the game, a phenomenal return to action for Tari Eason, and a much needed return to action because he gives the Rockets another look. He helps them on the defensive side of things. And it very much felt like in the stretches where the Rockets were able to rely on and have Tari Eason out there, in part because Jabari Smith Jr. was also in some early foul trouble in this game, wound up sitting at a couple different points with 2 fouls in the first quarter and then 3 fouls in the second quarter. Having Tari Eason to lean on to go out there and replace Jabari, and production-wise, I mean, it wasn't even in the same stratosphere as far as what Tari Eason gave on a per-minute basis in this game compared to Jabari. And you kind of felt that because you didn't get Tari Eason at all in the fourth quarter. And you didn't get him in overtime because he's on a minutes restriction. He's only going to be playing 15 to 20 minutes a night, unfortunately, while they ramp him back up. And this was a game where if Tari Eason didn't have the minutes restriction, then, I mean, well, outside of playing the 8 seconds on the final possession of OT, but this was a game where you probably could have really used Tari Eason. And arguably he might have been one of the guys out there in the closing lineup in that fourth quarter with how well he was playing. And maybe he could have stopped the bleeding. Maybe he could have been the answer to some of the Rockets' defensive issues, trying to slow down the Kings. And look, credit where credit's due. Dennis Schroeder, was the main reason for this Kings comeback. I'm not going to say single-handedly brought them back into this game, but his play in the second half of this one is what spearheaded the Kings' overall comeback, and the Rockets just didn't have an answer for Dennis Schroeder. They didn't have a point of attack guy that was able to stick to him and stay in front of him. And that's another area where even though they have Josh Okogie and Ime Thompson, and there were stretches where Reed Sheppard was guarding him, but that's where you also miss Fred VanVleet. You miss having that that point guard, that point of attack defensive piece where you can trust that Fred wouldn't have let Dennis Schroeder get off nearly as many clean looks, straight line drives to the rim, letting him get away with initiating and just kind of toying with the Rockets defense at times. He finished with 24 points and 10 assists off the Kings bench. And he was a big part of the reason the Kings got this win. So Rockets need to stop playing with their food, but they also need to figure out how to execute at the end of games. And until they do, losses like these are going to be a recurring story. And it's going to be frustrating each and every single time. I want your thoughts from this Rockets-Kings game. What went wrong in your eyes? Who were the standout performers? Who needs to look at themselves in the mirror and figure out what went wrong? Give me your thoughts in the YouTube comments. But as always, thank you so much for watching. Thank you so much for listening. We look forward to having you back right here at Locked On Rockets, your daily podcast home for everything Houston Rockets basketball.